This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Garib.
Deals, splits, and spin-offs. Merck goes shopping, Apple splits, and Time Inc. goes off on its own as some of the most recognizable names in American business embark on new chapters.
Debt relief. The White House makes it easier for some students to pay down their debt load and calls for more changes.
And kickoff. Will one of the world's biggest sporting events help lift South America's biggest economy? We have all that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Monday, June 9th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It was a wild Monday on Wall Street, and even though volatility spiked just a bit and the major averages saw just modest gains, equities did rise for a fourth session in a row, and that was enough for the Dow, the S&P 500, and the Dow Transports to close at fresh all-time highs once again. Investors got a lift from another round of corporate mergers, a major stock split, and the spinoff of a batch of some household magazine titles from one of the nation's oldest and biggest media companies. So here's how stocks ended the day on Wall Street. The Dow was up 18 points, the Nasdaq added 14, and the S&P ended 1 point higher. One of the biggest deals announced today was the drug giant Merck agreeing to buy specialty drug maker Idenix for nearly $4 billion. Shares of Dow component Merck ended fractionally higher today, but shares of Idenix rising by a staggering 229%. So what does Idenix have that made Merck pay all that money for it? Meg Terrell explains.
Merck's purchase of Idenix today for more than 3 times its Friday closing price continues a frenzy of deal-making around drugs for hepatitis C. Gilead kicked off the spree in 2011 with its purchase of Pharmasset, which gave it the lucrative drug Sovaldi, now priced at $84,000 for a 12-week course of treatment. Bristol-Myers followed in 2012 with Inhibitex, a deal it ultimately unwound due to safety issues with the drug. Bristol-Myers is still working in hepatitis C, joining Gilead, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, and others, competing for a market estimated at more than $20 billion by 2018.
I think Gilead's first quarter launch of their drug Sovaldi, that was $2.5 billion, give or take, maybe the fastest launch ever, verifies the fact that this is a tremendous market, and so that means a number of participants want to get into it, and I think that's a reflected in Merck's paying for Idenix this morning.
There are more than 150 million people worldwide chronically infected with hepatitis C. In the U.S., more than 3 million people are estimated to have the chronic liver disease, only half of whom are diagnosed. With the new drugs, treatment has been changing rapidly. Instead of taking medicines by injection, patients can now take pills. Side effects are diminishing, and cure rates are going way up. Merck Chief Executive Officer Ken Frazier has been highlighting the company's hepatitis C program as one of its most important in development. Idenix brings a class of drugs referred to as nucleotides, or nukes, to Merck, thought to be an important part of the new treatment regimens.
The landscape is likely to continue changing as Merck, AbbVie, and others join Gilead and Johnson & Johnson with this new generation of drugs already on the market. Already, investors have driven up the stock of a smaller biotech working in hepatitis C drugs, Achillion.
Gilead stock went in the opposite direction today. Analysts said Merck and Idenix both have patent challenges to Gilead Sovaldi, and their combination may give them more negotiating leverage. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell.
The Merck-Idenix deal was big, but there was an even bigger takeover offer today. Tyson Foods won the bidding war to acquire Hillshire Brands. This is the maker of Jimmy Dean sausage and Ballpark Franks. The winning bid, $8.5 billion, nearly $1 billion more than the top bid from rival Pilgrim's Pride, which withdrew its offer today for Hillshire. The deal is subject to Hillshire's release from its agreement to buy out Pinnacle Foods. Here's how all of the stocks did. Shares of Tyson Foods fell 6.5%. Hillshire Brands rallied more than 5%. Pinnacle also rose more than 1%, but Pilgrim's tumbled almost 7%.
Another acquisition to tell you about. Chipmaker Analog Devices has agreed to buy Hittite Microwave for $2 billion, getting a hold of Hittite's chips, which monitor changes in sound and temperature. ADI shares up 5% on the news. Hittite shares shooting up almost 29%.
Meanwhile, discount retailer Family Dollar Stores is trying to fight off a possible acquisition. It adopted a so-called poison pill strategy for next year in order to buy time to consider its next move after activist investor Carl Icahn revealed on Friday he owns more than 9% in the company. Icahn also said he would push the chain to merge with rival Dollar General. Shares of Family Dollar were the biggest gainer in the S&P today, surging more than 13%.
More now on the big news about Apple shares, which began the day trading at $92 each after the company completed a 7-for-1 stock split, making more shares available and making them more affordable to more investors. And those investors seemingly liked what they saw, sending Apple shares up 2% today. Apple's still the most valuable company on the planet, is just the latest public company to split its stock. But how do companies and shareholders fare after stocks are split? And what about Apple?
If you woke up this morning and didn't know about the Apple stock split, you might have wondered whether every iPhone, iPad, and MacBook had stopped working. Of course, that's not what happened. If you owned one share of Apple stock last Friday, it was worth more than $645. Today, Apple opened at $92. But your one share was now divided into 7. The value of your investment hadn't changed, not one bit, but the number of shares you own did. One famous study back in the 1990s found that stocks rise almost 8% in the year after a split and more than 12% in 3 years. There are no guarantees, of course, and most investment pros will tell you a split is no reason to buy a stock, perhaps especially for a company like Apple.
The stock split, I think, maybe in and of itself may not drive the stock higher, but new product news, and there's a lot of it coming from Apple, I think will drive the stock higher.
A new operating system announced just last week, an iPhone with a bigger screen possibly on the way, talk of a more capable Apple TV. It's all out there, plus a big stock buyback that just got $30 billion bigger. Apple's had mixed results with 3 previous splits, all 2-for-1, a far cry from today's very rare 7-for-1 split. Apple hopes will broaden its shareholder base. In 1987, the Apple split preceded a 2% rise in share price the following year. After a 2000 split, the share price dropped 57%. And after the 2005 split, shares jumped 60%. So, is Apple a trailblazer? Will more high-priced companies split this year? S&P's Howard Silverblatt names the usual suspects.
Priceline is over 1,000. Chipotle's 500. Amazon is in the 3 range. AutoZone over 400. Google just did a split, but they're still over 500. There's a lot of companies that are considered traditionally higher priced that are trading out there.
Well, one company whose shares didn't make Silverblatt's potential split list is Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. His company's A shares sell for about $192,000 apiece, and Buffett seems to like it that way, believing the high price creates a stable shareholder base. He did, however, once split his limited rights B shares 50-for-1 to create more currency for the acquisition of Burlington Northern.
Time Inc., meanwhile, the magazine unit that's home to People, Sports Illustrated, and Time Magazine, was spun off from parent company Time Warner today. Shares of Time also made their market debut on the New York Stock Exchange today. Time Inc.'s chief executive, Joe Rip, sounded upbeat about his company's prospects, despite an industry that's been stung by declining circulation and advertising revenue.
I've got some of the most trusted brands in the United States. 9 of my brands have been around for over 40 years. In fact, one of my brands is the oldest living, continuously published magazine in the world called The Field. I've got a great marketing machine that I can work. I've got strong cash flows. And to write off a company like that, I look at it as incredible. I mean, this company has great assets.
Investors didn't seem to have the same level of enthusiasm. Shares of Time fell nearly 1% on their first day of trading.
So can Time Inc. go it alone as a separate company? Porter Bibb thinks so. He's a media analyst and managing director at MediaTek Capital Partners. Porter, welcome. Good to have you with us. I should point out that both Susie and I spent some time at Time Incorporated, so we know the company at least reasonably well and have, by and large, fond feelings for it. Are you as enthusiastic as Joe Rip is?
I am, and I think Joe Rip is the right guy at this time to steer that ship, because what Time Inc. is a content company. It's not a magazine company. It's got, as Mr. Rip mentioned, it's got some of the 90 magazines that are some of the most iconic brands in the communications and entertainment business, finance, home furnishings, self-help. And one of the, you mentioned the Field magazine, that's part of their UK IPC media group. That magazine started in 1799, so they've got a little bit of a history, and they're actually not a bad survivor.
Mm-hmm. Well, as Tyler said, we do have fond feelings for it, but let's look at some of the facts. Advertising is down, circulation is down. The magazine business, we know, is an industry in decline. How exposed is Time?
Well, first of all, Susie, I think that I'm confused as to why Jeff Bewkes and Time Warner decided to spin Time Inc. off as a public company, because they had an option. They tried to sell it to Meredith and put it on the market for about 3 or 4 years, and there were no takers. But one of the things that they could have done that would have, I think, really put Time Inc. on a high plane was to create an ESOP, an employee stock owner company, because right now the people who are running Time Inc. and all of the magazines are suffering from the fact that they've had to, for decades, had to give all their profits back to Time Warner. They've never had any real capital to grow or to develop. They haven't really made a successful transition to the digital media. And they've still got these great brands. The one thing I don't agree with Joe Rip about is he is meeting every day with the editors and saying that they've got to cut back 25% of their editorial staff. Well, that's the guts of this business. It's a content creation business.
But Porter, are those brands as valuable as they once were? You have a brand like People magazine, but there are competitors out there nibbling at People in a way that it hasn't happened before, whether it's TMZ or Sports Illustrated. Not as valuable or dominant in its space as it was in the digital era.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. The whole media business has fragmented beyond imagination. But the brands, what people are looking for is A, something they recognize, B, something that brings value or pleasure or some entertainment to them, and C, they want to see something that's accessible.
Right.
Time Inc.'s titles are not accessible right now in the digital domain.
Yeah, even though the Time app on my iPad is pretty doggone good, and ditto the Sports Illustrated. Very quickly, would you buy the stock at this price?
I think it's a steal. It's 8 times PE. It's the same market cap as the New York Times. The New York Times makes a quarter of the profit that Time Inc. makes.
All right.
And I think if you're patient and wait, you're going to see a real, I think it's going to be taken over.
All right, Porter, thanks very much. Porter Bibb with Media Tech Capital Partners.
Still ahead on the program, playing to win, why billions are at stake for Microsoft and Sony as the two companies face off at the biggest annual gathering of the video game industry. That's coming up. President Obama taking action today to help millions of American college graduates pay down student loan debt. He signed an executive order expanding a program allowing federal loan borrowers to cap their payments.
We believe that in America, no hardworking young person should be priced out of a higher education. This country has always made a commitment to put a good education within the reach of young people willing to work for it.
The president said today's order could help an additional 5 million borrowers lower their monthly payments on federal loans. John Harwood joins us now from Washington with more on today's relief plan. John, you know, so many people are so burdened by all of the student loans. What exactly is the president promising to do, and who really benefits?
What he's doing, Susie, is telling people who borrowed before 2007, who previously were not eligible, that they can cap their repayments of student loans at 10% of their monthly income. And if they pay for 20 years at that rate and they still haven't paid it off, the loan is forgiven. This is something that Congress agreed to do going forward in 2010. In 2012, the president said the 1.7 million people who had borrowed between 2007 and 2012, that is to say people who were in college during the process of the law changing, that they were also eligible. Now he's gone before that to people who borrowed before 2007.
Let's talk a little bit about how much this would save borrowers and how much it would cost taxpayers. And is it likely that there will be some political blowback about sort of absolving people of commitments they took on?
We don't know, Tyler, how much this is going to cost the government. The administration didn't provide, under repeated questioning today, didn't provide an estimate for that, although they characterized the cost as modest. But for students, there's a big benefit in certain cases. The president spoke next to a young man who had both MBA loans and undergraduate loans. He was previously paying $800 a month. Under this new system, which caps his repayment at 10% of his income, only $200, so a big benefit for some people.
John, thanks a lot. John Harwood in Washington. A settlement has been reached with the group that runs big-time college sports over the use of student athletes in video games. The NCAA has agreed to pay $20 million to Division I college football and basketball players who filed a class action lawsuit over the unauthorized use of their names, images, and likenesses in video games made by Electronic Arts. Now, the deal still needs to be approved by a judge.
It was a big day in Los Angeles, the kickoff of the Electronic Entertainment Expo, E3, the biggest annual gathering for the video game industry where big names unveil the next big titles and consoles. Julia Borston has more.
With the new game consoles, Microsoft's Xbox One and Sony's PS4 off to a strong start, the mood here at E3 is upbeat, and the focus is on the new game announcements that will get consumers to keep buying games and the new consoles. And at the Xbox press conference, which kicked off the week of events this morning, the focus was not on the console as an entertainment hub, but rather as its service to its hardcore gamer fans.
You have to start with the core customer of the box, which I think is that gamer. But we've architected the box to support television and all forms of entertainment. It remains a strong part of our vision. But we know that day one customer every year has to be the gamer. You expand from that gaming audience out.
The second big event of E3 was Electronic Arts press conference. There, all the talk was about the big titles and the various ways gamers can play, with digital add-ons and mobile access. The hottest game, Battlefield Hardline. This is the first time EA has released a game in the franchise 2 years in a row.
At the end of the day, great games bring in a lot of players, and our focus right now is put the player first, build amazing games, and listen, they will actually live together inside the marketplace.
Over the next few days, all the other game makers will try to one-up EA with better and bigger titles and flashier graphics. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Julia Borston in Los Angeles.
McDonald's sales in the U.S. are still slipping, and so is the stock. And that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The world's largest burger chain reported a small rise in global sales, but here in the U.S., sales continue to decline. McDonald's blamed, quote, ongoing broad-based challenges for that slump. Shares were off a fraction to a $101.38. Shareholders of Netflix voted down a proposal today to split the company's chairman and CEO roles. That's according to Dow Jones. Reed Hastings, the company's founder, holds both of those titles. Shares of the video streaming service fell more than 1.5% to $423 and change.
Amazon has a new e-commerce strategy. The online retailer launched a service called Amazon Payments that lets consumers use their Amazon accounts to send and receive money and shop on other sites other than Amazon.com. The company will charge a fee to the other merchants for each transaction. Shares of Amazon off just a bit today to $327.50. Kraft Foods hiking coffee prices 10% because of rising green coffee bean costs. The move will affect its Maxwell House and U-Ban brands. Kraft is the second major American roaster to up prices. Just last week, we told you that J.M. Smucker increased its coffee prices by 9%. Shares of Kraft were up more than 1% today to $60.42.
Following Friday's solid jobs report, we continue our series on where the jobs are. Tonight, we look at the nuclear option. The Nuclear Energy Institute says 20,000 retiring workers will need to be replaced by the year 2018. But we found one utility hiring hundreds of new workers to man the first nuclear reactors to be built in the U.S. in decades. Mary Thompson has more from Jenkinsville, South Carolina.
At the VC Summer Nuclear Station, a massive derrick splits the summer sky. It's part of South Carolina Electric and Gas's $10 billion project to build the first 2 nuclear reactors in the United States in 30 years. At its peak, the project will employ 3,500 construction workers. But SCE&G is looking to hire a permanent workforce for another big job.
We're going to bring on about 800 total workers to support the staffing for our operating plants.
It will be 3 or 4 years before the reactors come online. But SCE&G's Chief Nuclear Officer Jeffrey Archie says hiring started 5 years ago.
What we wanted to make sure we did was we brought in the right people at the right time. So initially we're going to be doing a lot of training and a lot of instruction. So we hired instructors first.
Those instructors now train nuclear operators at a simulator built on the 240-acre site, the start of ongoing training these employees will receive throughout their careers. SCE&G has hired more than half of the 800 workers, but still needs engineers, mechanics, technicians, and chemists.
Depending on the job, the Nuclear Energy Institute says starting salaries in this industry will be about $52,000.
SCE&G wouldn't say what it pays, only that it's competitive and that it has a full benefits package. Now, the company is finding workers from the industry, military, and 4-year colleges, while partnering with local schools to create a pipeline of trained workers. One of those schools is Columbia, South Carolina-based Midlands Technical College. 5 years ago, Midlands President Sonny White says it co-developed a 2-year nuclear program with SCE&G, training workers to work here and abroad.
They can go to work anywhere in the world where the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has oversight.
The majority of Midlands nuclear students are adults, with many looking to change careers, like 37-year-old Kimberly Hall. The chemist left a job in the drug industry, lured by her fascination with nuclear energy's potential.
Since I am a scientist by nature, it's just the process that you can take uranium and power an entire city.
The hope of landing a steady job brought 25-year-old Wesley McLean to Midlands. Once a temporary worker for the state, he graduated last year and now works as a nuclear mechanic at SCE&G.
I'm not sure how far up the ladder I'll climb. I definitely plan on spending 30, 35 years with the company.
McQueen recharging his career by taking the nuclear option. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Mary Thompson, Jenkinsville, South Carolina.
Coming up, is the promise of a Brazil economic boom fueled by the World Cup going bust? If you're a soccer fan, or what the rest of the world calls football, you know that the World Cup starts Thursday in Brazil. But what was supposed to be a crowning moment for South America's largest economy is turning out to be a very costly embarrassment. Adding to the troubles, allegations of bribery at FIFA, the international body that governs the World Cup. Despite the stumbles, though, some investors think this could be a good time to invest in Brazil. Michelle Caruso Cabrera has more.
Riot police used tear gas against striking metro workers today in Brazil's largest city, São Paulo. The unionized workers demanded higher pay and blasted the billions spent by the country on the World Cup. It's just the latest headache for the Brazilian government as the games get started this week, with some stadiums unfinished and nearly all of them untested. Many infrastructure projects promised to improve transportation never got built, and those that did may have been built in haste. Late last month, heavy rain led to the roof collapse at a new airport constructed in the northern part of the country. The games were supposed to provide an economic boost to Brazil and create jobs. Estimates of how much has been spent range from $3.5 billion to nearly $15 billion. But CEOs tell us that concerns about protests and whether or not the country can pull it off is actually hurting the economy.
It's causing more uncertainties, and it's adding to the weakness of the Brazilian economy now.
The CEO of a huge Brazilian travel company says they will get the expected number of visitors, but it's not going to be gangbusters.
People think that the airports will be a mess, and on the end of the day, the airports will be empty.
This comes as the Brazilian economy is slowing and inflation is rising. Consumer confidence at a 5-year low, ditto for industrial confidence. And yet, it is precisely these problems leading some Wall Street firms to recommend investing in Brazil. Research firm Trusted Sources tells clients the more the country weakens, the more likely President Dilma Rousseff will lose her bid for re-election in October. The candidates running against her support economic policies that are much better for business. Trusted Sources thinks the Brazilian market could, quote, fuel a hope rally, not unlike the recent rally in India. Last month, India elected a new pro-business leader, Narendra Modi, and that led to a massive rally in the Indian stock market. Add to all of this, news of a massive bribery scandal involving the governing body of soccer, which is known as FIFA. Journalists have uncovered documents alleging the country of Qatar paid bribes in order to secure the World Cup in 2022. The allegations raise questions about how FIFA chooses the hosting country and whether or not they pick the countries for the right reasons. For Nightly Business Report, Michelle Caruso Cabrera.
And finally tonight, Detroit's big three automakers are giving back to the struggling city and the residents who helped make them great. The charitable arms of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler have committed a total of $26 million to help ease pension cuts and support the Detroit Institute of Arts. The donations are designed to preserve the city's cultural heritage and help municipal retirees who have seen their pension benefits slashed since the city declared bankruptcy last year. Every bit helps.
You going to watch the World Cup?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting warm-up to the Olympics, which come for that country in 2016. We'll see how it comes off, starting Thursday.
Too bad the economy part didn't work out, at least so far in Brazil. That's Nightly Business Report for us. I'm Susie Garrett. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm Tyler Matheson. Thanks from me as well. Have a great evening, everybody, and we'll hope to see you back here tomorrow night.
I'm Susie Garrett with a Nightly Business Report news brief. Some corporate acquisitions and a 7-for-1 stock split at Apple helped the Dow and the S&P 500 close at fresh all-time highs. The Dow added 18 points, getting close to the 17,000 level. The Nasdaq rose 14 and the S&P added 1 point. Tyson Foods won the bidding war to acquire Hillshire Brands, the maker of Jimmy Dean's sausage and Ballpark Franks. The winning bid, $8.5 billion, nearly $1 billion more than the top offer from rival Pilgrim's Pride. Drug giant Merck is paying nearly $4 billion for hepatitis C drug maker Idenix. Its shares skyrocketed 229%. And two companies filing to go public today: ice skates maker Bauer Performance Sports and internet domain company GoDaddy. Be sure to tune into Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.